when I started this, I thought, well, this is so obvious. I shouldn't give a TED talk about it because everyone's just going to sit there and go, well, yeah, duh. And it turns out that it wasn't so obvious.
No, millions of people have now watched this.
Almost 50 million now.
Wow.
But I think it's because we have gotten drawn away from this. It's hiding in plain sight.
What you're about to hear could literally save your life. It's a conversation with Dr. Robert Waldinger, the man behind the longest running study on happiness ever done.
He's a Harvard psychiatrist, New York Times bestselling author, and a Zen priest who, after decades of research, has uncovered a harsh truth about happiness you will not see coming.
So if you've been feeling stuck, disconnected, or just wondering what truly leads to lasting happiness, then this episode of BSU is for you. Bob, if you had to sum up Harvard's 87 years of research on happiness in one sentence, what would you say?
It's that relationships keep us happier and healthier as we go through our lives.
So simple. And also not what I think the average person would expect. I definitely didn't expect that to be the answer when I picked up your book for the first time. And I remember reading your book, and it came at the perfect time for me because I was at a period in my life where I was checking all the boxes. I'm a box checker. That's
Me too.
you know, I love checking those boxes. So at the time that I picked up your book, I was checking all the boxes. I was meditating every day, journaling every day, working out every day, working really hard at my job, and actually doing really well in my career. And then I would look at myself in the mirror every day, and I just felt so unhappy. And I was so confused because I just felt like I'm doing all the things that I've been told my whole life are going to make me happy. And then I read your book, and I had a facepalm moment, and I was like, wow, I've had happiness all wrong this entire time. So for people who are new to your work and new to this study, can you share a little bit more about what the Harvard study of adult development actually is, and what are some of its most unique findings?
Sure. So the study is the longest study of people living their entire lives that's ever been done. So we're in our 86th year.
Wow.
It started in 1938. It started with two groups that didn't have any connection to each other, a group of Harvard University undergrads, sophomores, who were chosen by their deans because they were fine, upstanding specimens. And it was meant to be a study of normal development from adolescence to early adulthood. And now we sort of laugh about this because, if you want to study normal development, you study all white guys from Harvard, and we're constantly, we have to explain to NIH where they fund us, why they should still fund us, because we are so politically incorrect now, as we should be. A sample of white men is just not representative. On the other hand, it was then thought to be a way to study how people thrive. The other group was a group from Boston's inner city, and it was, again, boys, middle school age, from not just the poorest families, but from families that were so troubled that they were known to 5 social service agencies on average. So domestic violence, parental mental illness, physical illness, extreme poverty, right?
So 2 ends of the spectrum.
2 ends of the spectrum, so underprivileged and so privileged. And eventually my predecessor, George Valiant, brought these 2 studies together and said, let's look at these contrasting groups and watch them go through their lives. So we've done that. We've added women now, thank goodness. So we first added the wives, and then we've added the children.
Wow.
More than half of whom are female.
Wow. So are there still, this study started in what year?
1938.
1938. Is there anyone still alive?
Yeah. Okay. Originally, there were 724 people, men. And there are about 10 who are still alive, and they're all over age 100.
Wow.
And we're still in touch with them.
Wow.
And of course, we're still studying their children. Their children are all baby boomers. So they're kind of average age 65.
Gotcha. So that's really what makes this unique, right? Is that unlike other studies, rather than look at people when they get to the age of 100 and ask them, so what makes a happy life? And then they have to rely on their memory,
Yes.
which can be this fuzzy thing, right?
Really fuzzy.
What you have now is a lot of concrete data.
Yeah.
And that's what you all have
Yeah.
studied all these years. And that's how you've gotten to this understanding that relationships are the most important thing.
Yeah.
What are the 3 big lessons you learned about relationships from the research?
Well, the first is that warm relationships really matter. So the kind of relationships where you feel safe, where you feel like you can be yourself, sort of authentically who you are, that those matter a lot. And the feeling that you can rely on somebody to be there when you really are in trouble, when you really need somebody. So that's kind of the first thing, that it's the warmth and the stability of a relationship that matters for keeping us healthy. But also that it doesn't just make us happier, that it protects our bodies. So relationships get into our bodies. If you're in good relationships, it makes it less likely you're going to get type 2 diabetes as you get older, less likely you're going to get coronary artery disease, arthritis. Like, we didn't believe this at first. Like, how could that be a thing? And then the other thing we learned, this is number 3, is that it protects our brains too. That people who are more connected to other people and less stressed in warmer relationships, they have cognitive decline later in life if they get it at all. And then that decline happens more slowly. So this kind of social activity stuff that we're talking about is really protective as we get older.
Why do you think relationships are so helpful for our happiness? What about relationships makes them so helpful?
Yeah. Well, we've been asking that for about 10 years because at first we didn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then other studies began to find the same thing. Because, when your study finds something, you shouldn't believe it necessarily unless other research projects begin saying, oh yeah, we find similar things going on. So then we started to look at, well, how does this work? The best idea we have is that it has to do with stress, that relationships are stress relievers. So, let's say, for example, you have something really annoying happen that's really frustrating during your day. Do you have somebody you can go home and complain to? Do you have somebody you can call on the phone? Can you guys complain to each other? And if you can usually feel your body start to calm down, and especially if you have somebody who's a decent listener. And that's different from being socially isolated. There's now a finding that 1 in 4 people in the United States has nobody they can confide in.
Wow.
Nobody they can talk to about their personal life. So think about that. Like, you have nobody you can talk to about life's ups and downs. We think those are the people who are under the most stress, and they're the people whose bodies break down sooner as they get older.
So loneliness literally kills.
Absolutely.
That, going back to picking up your book at the perfect time, that was my big revelation. I was doing all of these things that did make me happier, like exercise and journal, but I was lonely. I had no idea. It was like this insidious thing that I did not realize. I was lonely as hell.
You talk about that part of loneliness, right? Because I think that's so interesting, because you weren't necessarily lonely in the sense of there was no one around you, right? Me and you were in the office together every day. You had Sunday dinner with the family, but it's so interesting that you can be lonely, right? Without
Absolutely.
meaning that you're alone.
Right. So what kept you lonely even though you had people around?
If I'm completely honest with myself, looking back at that time, I was just too focused on myself. And I was so focused on checking my own boxes that I went into this cave within myself where the only thing I cared about was success and my own personal growth and checking my boxes. And I completely neglected the people around me and the connections that I shared with them. And when I was with Nick or my wife in this period of time, I wasn't actually with them. I wasn't actually present with them. I was thinking about work. I was thinking about something else that I wanted to do later. I wasn't actually there. And then I read your book and it completely shattered like my entire mind. It was like hitting a reset button. And then I started to become more present. I started to lean more into those relationships that were right in front of me. I just needed to really lean into them more. And slowly but surely, I started to feel just a lot better, almost like this bubbling up from inside that was just like, all right, this was what I was missing. You know, that it was really that simple. It was just being present in the relationships that were already right in front of me.
It's such a useful example because, as you know, you are not alone.
Yeah.
Like we get it drummed into us. We got to be successful. We got to achieve. And even like the wellness stuff, the whole wellness industry, multi-billion-dollar, is mostly about self, right? It's about doing the yoga, even sitting and meditating, which we all three love, right?
Yeah.
But if it's all about self, it turns out those wellness programs don't move the needle on feeling better about life. They don't. And what's missing is this connection that we were built to have. So we think actually that we evolved to be more connected to each other, which is why this kind of thing can happen when you're only focused on yourself.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? There was a lesson in my life that I learned before this. So back in my early 20s, I was California dreaming. I grew up in New York, and my whole life I dreamed of going to Southern California. And every time the winter comes, I'm California dreaming every single year. I couldn't take the cold anymore, and I would just imagine this beautiful life with the palm trees and sunshine. So one year after leaving college, I said, you know what? I'm going to spend a few months in California by myself. And so I booked an Airbnb. I flew to LA, and I stayed in LA by myself. And first week or so, I was California living. It was amazing. I was happy as can be. I felt the sunshine on my face. I went for runs by the ocean. Life was so good. About 2 weeks in, same thing that I described earlier. It was like starting to get this like depression, or like this just this low level just loneliness and depression. But I didn't realize it was loneliness until later. And then a whole month goes by, and I realized a very important lesson, which was that it didn't matter where I was. All that mattered was who was around me. And I should have really remembered that during this period, but it had slipped my mind. But that one experience taught me so much. You can't escape. You can't escape.
Yeah. You know, in my other job, which is to be a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, we call it the geographic cure. Like a lot of people will come in and say, you know, I'm going to move across the country and that's going to make my life work out. And then it turns out, you know, as they say, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
And if you leave lonely, you're likely to arrive lonely as well.
I feel like that can also be used with the whole getting rich is going to make me happy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like I always think about it like that. If you're not happy when you don't have the money, you're not going to be happy when you get the money, right? Like it's like you could be happy along the journey, right?
Yeah.
And what does the data say from the study? Like, are wealthier people happier than less wealthy people, according to the data from the study?
Yeah, exactly. And especially looking at the two ends of the spectrum, right? So what about the Harvard kids versus the kids from the inner city? Was there a difference in terms of their happiness levels?
No, there wasn't.
Wow.
The inner city kids were just as happy as they went through their lives.
Really?
But this was a time when it was the post-World War II boom, where you could, and if you were white in Boston, you could get ahead. You could buy a house in a decent neighborhood, send your kids to a decent school, get decent health care, right? And a lot of my colleagues who study communities of color say, you know, you couldn't do that if you were a person of color. So part of it was this exceptional time and this exceptional group of people who were all Caucasian. Because the city of Boston in 1938 was 97% white.
Wow.
So, but kind of gets to this thing, and if you don't mind, I'll get a little geeky. So it wasn't just our research, but they've done research now on this question of, well, do we get happier as we get wealthier, as we earn more money. And it turns out that as we earn more money to get our basic needs met, like food security and housing and all that we do get happier. Like every dollar matters.
Absolutely.
And that then once we reach a threshold, so maybe 10 years ago, they estimated it was $75,000 a year.
Inflation has
average
changed it. It's
Throw
that number right out the window.
Yeah. You can't buy a dozen eggs for but so 75,000 a year was the average, and depending on where you live, of course.
Yeah.
But that once you get beyond that, your happiness does go up, but not by a huge amount. So the idea is that if you're looking for wealth to make you happy, it's not going to do that. It's not necessarily going to make you unhappy either. They're kind of wealth and happiness are kind of independent of each other. And we all know about really wealthy people who are miserable. We know about really not wealthy, poor people who are quite happy.
Yeah. Sure.
So it's really important because we get sold this myth. You look at these advertisements where if you just buy this car, you're going to be so happy, But
also as a society, right? You talk about the study where you ask millennials, right, what they want when they're older. And so many of them say wealth and fame.
Exactly.
Which are complete opposite of what actually is going to make us happy.
Exactly.
And why is that? Is it because the culture has kind of infused that into us?
Yeah.
It's social media? Is that?
Well, it's the culture. It didn't begin with social media, but that's certainly ramped it up.
But the men on Madison Avenue?
Yeah, like think about the messages. Madison Avenue. Think about the messages we get all day long, about what's like. I walk around the streets of New York City and I love it here. It's so fun to be here. But look at the advertisements, these really unrealistic pictures of who these happy people are, and what they're doing and what they own, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
What we're told, and we're told it subliminally all day long.
Yeah.
Right. So it's definitely that. It's also that you can measure how much money you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can measure how many followers you have, how many likes, right? So being able to put metrics on it gives us this false sense of, oh, I'm really somebody because I've got this much money.
You could check those boxes.
Yeah,
exactly.
And relationships are really hard, right? They're not this quick thing like, oh, I can deal with Mike and go out to lunch with him and that's it. That relationship is done. It's a lifelong pursuit.
And they're messy, right? Like you guys had to deal with each other on The Amazing Race, right? And
that's an understatement.
And you said right, and you said at times you're ready to kill each other.
Yeah.
And so how do you negotiate all the ups and downs of a relationship? And yet it looks like it's one of the core pillars of your life, right?
Well, I think that's really interesting because Mike and I are kind of like work married, and you talk about marriage, and what makes a good marriage is not necessarily the couples that never fight, right?
Right.
What is it?
It's affection and respect. So what we did was we brought couples into our laboratory and we asked them to have an argument about the usual things they argue about. So it might have been sex, it might have been shopping, it might have been kids. And they would pick something, and the video cameras were all set up, and they'd start arguing, and they would just be off to the races. They would forget about the video cameras. They'd be into it. And we had people come in and watch their videotapes afterwards and rate and just rate what emotions they were expressing as they had their argument. And we thought, well, it's going to be the amount of anger that's going to predict who's going to break up, who's going to be unhappy. 4 years, 5 years later, when we checked in, it didn't matter. The angry couples were just as likely to stay together. It was whether you could see affection and respect between the couple, even when they were having an argument. And if you could see affection and respect, they were much more likely to stay together and be happy together.
What did that look like? Like, can you give me an example? Or like I acted out or something? Well, you don't have to act it out, but like when you were watching, what did respect and affection actually look like in the midst of that fighting? Just so like, I want to know for myself what it actually looks like.
So it would be being really angry, at your partner and then saying, yeah, but I know I was kind of an asshole that day too. it would be that. It would be backing off and saying, I've got my role in this.
Yeah.
It would be making an affectionate joke, not making fun, right? Not being sarcastic, but just often it would be an in-joke that they both shared that we didn't even get watching their
So
video
just like
tape.
love, like you could still see there was love there.
And we're still connected.
Got
Yeah, we can be mad at each other, but we're still connected.
Got it.
So in conclusion, is marriage good for our happiness or bad for our happiness?
Well, it doesn't have to be marriage, right? You don't have to have a marriage license, but intimate relationships are good for us if they're, reasonably good relationships, right? If they're horrible and you fight all the time, that's not good. But intimacy is good. And also, it can be friends, right? Like you don't have to have an intimate partner. If you have, like the family you choose, like a few close friends, those relationships can be just as supportive and just as health promoting.
How do I know if I'm in an intimate relationship?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I guess the first thing is, do you feel like you have to hide important parts of yourself, or do you feel like you can be who you are, basically? And that the other person kind of gets you and it's okay. Like they may not like everything about you. Like, who likes everything about our partner that we've been with? I mean, my wife and I have been together for 39 years.
Wow.
And we do love each other, but we annoy each other, of course, right? But it's kind of like, do we accept each other? Can we be ourselves? It's that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And also, the other way is it mutual? Like, I think you've all been in relationships where it seems all one way.
Yeah.
Like one person does all that talking, one person does all that asking, the other person does all the giving. That gets old, and that's not so stable.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Let's transition here to talking about death a little bit. So Mike and I, we both have this tattoo on us that says memento mori, forget but you die. We think it's a very important reminder to live well. And one part of your study that I really enjoyed was you asked people later in their lives when they were closer to death, that were genuinely happy, what were their proudest moments, and then what were their regrets?
Yeah.
And what did you discover when you asked those questions?
Yeah. The proudest moments were always about something to do with relationships. So people would say, I'm proud that I was a good parent. I was a good mentor. I was a good boss, good spouse, right? That always about that. And some of these people had like won Nobel Prizes, and run corporations, but they didn't talk about that. It was all, and they weren't prompted. It was just, what are you proudest of? And then the biggest regret was, I wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. I wish I'd spent time with the people I cared about more.
Wow.
And then the other thing, and this was more something women said more than men, I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying about what other people thought.
Wow.
So relationships was just clear as day. Like,
the reason I love that so much is because like you get so much clarity when you go to the end, right? There's this whole concept of rocking chair test. Like right now, even the ages we are, we can project ourselves out and ask ourselves those questions. I want people listening to this right now to really do that, right? Project yourself out. When you're at the end of your life, ask yourself that question. What are you going to be most proud of? What are you going to regret? And you realize, wow, it's not how many things I accomplish or how many awards I win. It's really how I treat the people around me, how they feel about me. And I just think it's such an important thing to just reflect on.
Yeah. We did an exercise where we asked people, we said, imagine you're going to live to be 100 and you're going to be healthy and they're going to have a 100th birthday celebration for you. What do you want people to say about you? And so it's kind of like when you look back on your life, what are you going to want to hear from people?
Bob, I'm curious. You are like a master box checker.
I know.
You're extremely successful.
Yeah.
You got a New York Times bestselling book. You're a Zen priest. You run the Harvard study of adult development. many, many achievements in your life, but just coming into contact with you in person, there's this love and this presence about you where you can tell that although you're a box checker, you still have this beautiful balance going on in your life. Like I'm sitting here, the reason what I'm getting to is I'm sitting here and I'm also, I mean, I don't want to call myself a master box checker, but I'm obsessed with checking boxes. And that's all I think about all day long. And I'm sure there are people listening that are the same way. And I'm listening to like this conversation about how important relationships are. And at the end of your life, the boxes that you check aren't as important. But I'm also wondering, okay, but like, how do I actually like use this? Like, how do I stop being like, I'm a box checker, but how do I like stop being so obsessed with these boxes that I want to check? Or maybe I don't have to. Like, how do you balance it is really the question that I'm getting at.
Well, first of all, I'm still working on it. I'm 74 years old. I'm still working on it.
You look great, man.
Right. Yeah. But this stuff doesn't end. Right. So, I didn't get to be a Harvard professor without being a box checker.
Yeah.
And so, but what actually Zen training has helped me with a lot is kind of that back to memento mori, because Zen is also very much about coming back to, this is very temporary, this life we have. What do I want to do with it? And so, I mean, I think that part of it is I move in and out of checking the boxes, but I've learned to stop and say, okay, is it important to check this box right now? So I get an invitation to do something fancy and there's a family thing going on. And I stop and I say, okay, how do I balance this? Right? I don't always make the right choice, but I work on it. Right? And I'm making better choices, I hope, now than I used to.
Yeah.
When I was young and much more ambitious. And I think also just I ask more about which boxes. Right? So that's the other thing. Like people are, I'm sure, as you guys achieve more and you're achieving a lot, people are going to keep asking you to do more stuff, right? Yep. What is the stuff that's going to feel worthwhile to you? What are you going to look back on and say, that was worth my time?
Yeah. Yeah. We reflect on this a lot. We were, at one point we were asked to be speakers at President Clinton's School of Public Service. And we were flying out there. And I remember this very specific moment. We were sitting in the airport and we were eating a meal together. And I looked at Mike and I said, wow, think about how much this would suck if it was just one of us eating in this airport right now by ourselves, going to give this talk. Like, look how special this is that we get to share this moment together.
Yeah.
And that really, it just makes this concept of relationships come to light so much more to me, right? Like there's been so many real life examples where I've seen it proven true. And I'm sure people listening to this, if they really reflect on their lives, they'll see it too.
Yeah.
The real happiness comes from when you feel that bond that you're sharing this experience with other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and I find that even when I travel, like I really want my wife to come. I don't like, I rarely, like I will travel, but I'll just do like a overnight thing and come right home unless Jennifer will come with me. And if she'll come with me, it's sort of like that, then sitting in an airport is fun because we get to gossip about what's going on around us. Otherwise it's just.
Yeah. That's funny that you say that. One of the biggest things I learned from you was basically adding relationships to things you're already doing. Right. So I have a lot of boxes that I want to check and then I put those boxes onto a weekly calendar.
Yeah.
So for someone like me who thinks of my life in that way, I've just basically added, like I have boxes for my health, I have boxes for my wealth, and now I have boxes for my relationship. So I've turned my relationship thing into boxes that I want to check. Obviously, then once you're in those relationships and checking that box, you need to be present or else like, what's the point? But having a whole like set of goals, like I have a goal every week to meet with one of my best friends. Like I want to prioritize that he gets on my calendar at least once a week.
That's great.
I have a goal every month, let's say, to do something kind for my wife, surprise her with flowers, XYZ, something along those lines. So I'm actually checking boxes for those. But the real life hack that you've given me is, in order to see my friend once a week, I don't actually have to like add an extra slot in order to see him. I've actually just started asking myself, where can I fit him into something that I'm already doing? So I run a few times a week.
Yeah.
I'll tell him the days that I'm running and ask him if he wants to go for a run with me.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to like find this extra time, especially for parents that are listening or really busy people
Yeah.
who, you know, have limited time to spare for this really important bucket, which are the close relationships around you. That life hack of just trying to add people to the things you're already doing was game changing for absolutely game changing.
I mean, it could be meeting somebody at the gym, right? Or meeting somebody for a run, or
inviting them to lunch that you're already going to have at the office, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm thinking about someone listening to this right now who says, oh, great, relationships are the most important thing, but I'm an introvert and I really don't like seeing people often.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Well, that's not a problem, right? So
let's get to here.
Because the problem with what I'm saying is you could take away from this, you got to be an extrovert or you're screwed. And that's not true. You know, we're all like on a spectrum from being introverts to being extroverts. And there's nothing wrong there at all with being an introvert. It's just that you need fewer people in your life than the extrovert does. And in fact, having a lot of people in your life could be more stressful. What we know is that everybody, including introverts, needs at least one or two people who are there.
Like those quality relationships.
And beyond that, they may refuel by being alone, by, sitting quietly, by meditating. I mean, there are a lot of people in the meditation world who are introverts, and they refuel by sitting on the cushion in silence, hour after hour.
Yep.
That's totally cool. And it's important to say that because, in our culture, we sort of glorify party animals, and that's silly because party animals are no healthier in any way than people who are quieter and need fewer people around.
Yeah. I'm an introvert, so that's helpful for me.
Yeah.
And like when I'm alone is when I refuel. And there are times where we have meetings all day long. And at the end of it, Nick's like super charged up. And then you see me just like for example, here's a specific story. We went to the TED conference one year.
Yeah.
And it was the first time we'd ever been. And if you've ever been to the TED conference, it's
it's one of the most viewed TED talks.
I mean, you've been to a TED conference.
No, but I've never been to the main TED conference.
Really?
Oh, wow.
My TED Talk was given in a little elementary school auditorium.
Get out of here.
Really?
Wow.
In suburban Boston.
That's fascinating.
Wow.
Okay.
So, but I've actually been to a TED conference, and they're so intense.
Yeah, they're very overstimulating. And I remember it was like 3:00 in the afternoon, and I told Nick, I really can't do this anymore. And I walked back to the hotel room. I shut the blinds, turned off all the lights, just went into complete darkness. Yeah. I literally needed to. And that's never happened to me in my whole life. But I really, really needed to just be alone in darkness.
Yeah.
Just a few minutes.
Totally.
And then I got my energy back, and then I was able to go back later. But I needed that break to myself. So I totally resonate with all the introverts out there.
Yeah. And I'm this combination. Like there's a part of me that's pretty introverted. And as a kid, I was more introverted.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten better. I've sort of trained my extroverted muscles a little better. But there are times when I'm fried like you were. Yeah. And I just have to be off by myself and meditate or read or just do something quiet, listen to music.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting that I'm very curious about is you're kind of playing two different sides of the same coin here. So on one hand, you are running this Harvard study. Science-backed study all about the importance of relationships and human connection and attachment in a way.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, you're a Zen priest.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest principles, at least from our understanding of Zen, is detachment and impermanence. So how do you balance this
I love this.
attachment with the detachment? Like how do you keep both of those in your hands at the same time?
So everybody, including me, thinks that Zen is about detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know it's not.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So there's this, the image of the Zen master, right, is that you're totally chill no matter what happens, right? and nothing phases you, and you don't, if bad things happen, doesn't matter. That is not what Zen is. That's not what real meditation practice is. It's really engaging with life as fully as you can.
Wow.
So what it means is that I feel deeply when terrible things happen. In fact, I think I feel it more now because what meditation teaches you to do is face toward the stuff that's difficult.
Yeah.
And so if anything, I feel it more now than I used to. I let myself feel it more. It's really being able to be with whatever comes your way in life. That's what the practice is about. It's not about being detached. I'm really glad you asked that because, like this stereotype of just being totally chill,
Yeah.
like anybody who's like that is either faking it or they're not built the way most humans are built.
Yeah.
Because most of us are built to feel and ideally to be engaged in the world.
So how has the practice of Zen changed your view on happiness, if at all?
Gotten me to realize that bad stuff happens and that I can be with it and live through it. It doesn't mean I care about it a lot and I do my best to work toward making things better, to relieving suffering. That's the big project of Buddhism in general, that's the purpose of life, to relieve suffering. But it's helped me realize that everything's impermanent. So I happen to be pretty upset right now about what's happening in our country and about a lot of things that are happening in the world. And this stuff happens and it will pass and other stuff will happen, of course, that I can't predict. And that's the other thing Zen has taught me, that even though I can be so sure I know like how things are going to turn out, good or bad, I don't know. And things usually turn out differently in my life and in the world than I expect them to turn out.
How are they connected? What's the connection points between all the research and the discovery of relationships with Zen?
Well, Zen is very much about memento mori. Zen is constantly reminding me. We chant at every sitting, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
It's
that.
one of the 5 remembrances of Buddhism.
Wow.
Yeah. And some people, they come to our Zen group, they hear that and they run screaming in the other direction, right? And for me, it was like, oh,
We're the weirdos that run in.
we're the weirdos that run in. We're the weirdos. This is what's telling the truth, because it's such a relief, right? And so I think it's sort of realizing the finiteness of life. And then, so what we study in the research, and this may be a bit of a tangent, but we study the fact that humans get happier as they get older. Like I used to think we got more depressed, like old age is, it looks terrible and I don't want to be old. Well, here I am.
Yeah.
And actually, like most older people, I've gotten happier as I get older. And one of the reasons research shows us is that it's because we have a stronger sense of the reality of death. And that rather than making us more depressed, it makes us prioritize what matters. And it makes us prioritize well-being more.
Wow.
Yeah. So people stop spending time in those meetings that they don't really care about anymore.
Yeah.
They let go of relationships that they really haven't enjoyed for a long time. And they just do more of what
for me personally, hearing that is a relief, because me and my wife were having a conversation the other night and we were just saying, man, we thought our 20s were supposed to be like fun. They're freaking hard.
They're hard.
Like the late 20s, early 30s that me and Nick are in, they're hard.
They're hard.
They're not fun. Like I thought they would be. Like I feel like we expect those years to be so fun.
Yeah.
But really they're not.
No, they're not. And we, the culture kind of glorifies it. Like you guys have your youth, you've got everything made. Well, in fact, the loneliest age group in the US is under 30.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that like consistent through history, or is that just happening now because of social media?
I don't know about that. I know that it's happening now, but I don't know about past, because they didn't study loneliness that much in the past.
And now it's being studied a lot, right? Like the UK has just put somebody, what are they called?
a minister of loneliness.
Minister of Loneliness.
Yes, yeah.
And then
Wouldn't you like to be that person?
and the U.S. Surgeon General, is that what his name is?
Yeah, that yeah.
He declared that we are in a loneliness epidemic,
We are.
which just shows that we're in a very unhappy place.
Yeah.
Because based on what we said, right? If relationships make us happier, and we are in a loneliness epidemic, then we are a very unhappy country.
Well, and we can accidentally fall into loneliness the way you did.
Yeah.
You you weren't pushing people away deliberately. You weren't doing any of that. You were just, and I think a lot of what happens is our lives take us down these paths where suddenly we turn around and say, I don't have anybody here with me.
Which is really wild in my opinion, because when we look at technology and we look at these big companies right now, like Facebook, Meta, like their mission is literally to connect the world, right?
Yeah.
And we're all more connected than we've ever been, right?
Yeah.
But we're lonelier than we've ever been.
Yeah.
So what's going on with social media and how we use it? Is there a way that we can use it better? Or is it just like we're screwed because social media exists?
No, there is a way we can use it better. And as we know, social media is not going away.
Yeah.
Unless it morphs into something even scarier or weirder than that. But they've done some research now that shows that social media is not the enemy. It's how we use it that matters. So if we use social media actively to connect with other people, it actually lifts us up. It raises our energy and our well-being. So like I have a friend who during COVID, he reached out to his elementary school friends on Facebook, and they were so excited to connect. And they now have a Zoom call every Sunday morning where they have coffee together on Facebook. They're all over the country, right? They're so excited about that use of social media. And then you have people who doom scroll through other people's Instagram feeds and TikTok videos. And when you just passively consume other people's curated lives, you start feeling worse about yourself.
So to summarize, we want to move from passive consumption to active participation.
Yep.
And that's how we can really turn the knob and move towards happiness.
Yes. And turn away from any of those voices that make you feel afraid, any of those people who, any of the haters, just turn it off. Because we can. That's the other thing, that we ultimately can do that.
We have the control.
We have the control to do that. It's hard, but
I deleted like social media for January 1st. I said I'm going on a social media purge, and I just deleted all of them.
Yeah.
Cleanse. Yeah. And I think social media is awesome, but I was so much happier with all of those apps deleted. And then when I went back, I was like, I didn't really miss this at all.
Yeah.
And I think.
So what are you doing now?
I have like a little bit of a balance where I'll go on, check it for a few minutes just to see if I think if we didn't run our whole business on social media,
that's it.
I probably would completely eliminate it from my life.
Yeah.
But honestly, in person just trumps it every time for me. Like in terms of if I monitor how I feel after an in-person dinner with my friends or with my spouse or my family, like anything in person, as opposed to even a DM or like anything on social media. I think there's like levels to how much happiness you can get. Like if all of your friends are across the country and the best you can do is Zoom, do that.
Yeah.
But if you can do the in-person, I highly recommend it from my own experience.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the research says, but from my own experience, in person is just like, if you could force yourself to do it, even as an introvert, just try.
Absolutely. Now, what do you guys say to the gamers? Because I've heard many gamers say, that's my social network.
Yeah.
The people online. No, I've never met them in person, but it doesn't matter. And I'm not in this world. I'm not a gamer, but do you know much about this?
I mean, it just becomes your family in a sense, right?
Yeah.
It's like the people that you share your problems with, right? Is like in a sense, you can have an online family. Well, I want to go back to what Mike was saying about social media. We're in the same camp as you, where we think social media is not evil. We think social media is a tool.
Yeah.
And it's all in the hands of the beholder.
Yeah.
And like, that's why a part of our mission is to use media as a force for good.
Yeah.
How can we create content? How can we have conversations like this that actually get people to feel better, to move towards a happier life? And that's how we have kind of coped with this social media thing. It's like, we have more power than we think.
Yes, we do have more power than we think. And each person has the power to, you can do a test, and maybe that's something we should share with people more, that you could just try using a particular platform for 20 minutes and check yourself before, check your energy level and your openness, and then check it after. Does that platform, being on it, make you feel more open toward people, more connected? Or does it lower your energy and make you feel more afraid, more insecure? And if it's the latter, don't go there.
That's a great point.
I do have to say, though, about the video game thing, in middle school, I had probably the happiest times of my entire life, pulling all-nighters with my friends, playing video games all night long.
Really?
And I will look back on those moments as peak happiness in my life, like true happiness. So,
and what did your parents do?
Our parents had a very hands-off way.
Well, their motto was simple. The most important priority, they're Italian immigrants. So for them, the most important thing was that we did well in school, because they came to this country and it was like, we came here to give you an opportunity, go to school, get good grades, and be good people.
And so if you did that,
and if you did that, then you had more freedom and autonomy to
pretty good.
Explore. And it was great. And honestly, going to this Italian immigrant thing, I want to bring this up for a moment, because this was another experience, an example of when I learned the power of relationships towards happiness versus money. So we grew up in Brooklyn, New York City, the concrete jungle, go after your dreams, hustle culture. And then every summer when we were kids, we would go to Italy. And my mom comes from a very small town in Italy. Like, I'm talking about in the mountains, less than 1,000 people.
Wow.
So we would be these New York kids that had 1,000 people that lived on our block.
And everybody knew you.
And
in this town.
And then we go to this town, and these people don't have a lot of money. They really don't. They work on the farms. Like, they really do not have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you know what? Just about every single one of them was happy. Because you know why? They had such a strong sense of community. Everyone knew each other. At the end of the night, everyone would get together in Piazza. The old men would play cards, play bocce. The old women would walk along the passageway and sit down and gossip with each other. And it was just like, wow, look at this. They don't have a lot of things, but they have a lot of connection, and they are happier than all these people that we see back home that have all this money, but they don't have this form of connection.
Yeah.
It was so powerful to like experience that.
Yeah. And they probably also knew who you guys were, right? Oh yeah, these are the kids from New York. You know, and because everybody knows everybody, and you kind of know more about everybody else's business. And
but it was just such a powerful like lesson that I learned that I still take with me today. And it's just like that sense of community really is so important. It's so much more important than just isolating yourself so that you can make lots of money. And I think I speak so passionately about this because I was that kid who graduated from college, and my goal was to make as much money as I possibly could. And then when I quit my job and I stopped just chasing the money and started chasing meaningful work and meaningful relationships is when I really saw a huge internal shift in myself. Thank you for writing such a powerful book on such concrete data that like it's not just theory, right? There's science here, and I think so many people can get behind that. And I just want to say thank you.
No, well, it's a pleasure to be able to talk about it, you know, with you guys, because we share a lot of the same values in this, and also to get the word out, because, you know, when I started this, I thought, well, this is so obvious. I shouldn't give a TED talk about it because everyone's just going to sit there and go, well, yeah, duh. And it turns out that it wasn't so obvious.
No,
that
millions of people have now watched this.
almost 50 million now.
Wow.
But I think it's because we have gotten drawn away from this. It's hiding in plain sight, right?
Yeah.
The fact that relationships make us happy.
Yeah.
But we all get drawn away by the shiny baubles
Yep.
out there in the world.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I need the constant reminder. Like I need to keep your book out.
Yeah.
And just to remind myself, because I'll go like, I'll get back into that like cave of like goals. I need to hit goals. So, yeah. And then it's like, oh, no, relationship. Well, it's relationships that make me happy.
Yeah.
I have to keep reminding myself.
Well, that's a good pivot here. And I want to end on some practical things people can take away. What if you had to give people some advice for their daily life to start moving towards a happier, more meaningful life, some practical things they can start doing? What do you got for us?
Well, like the hack that you were talking about, like figure out where you can just build a quick contact into your day. Maybe you're, commuting on a bus or on a train and you could text somebody just saying, hi, I was just thinking of you and wanted to say hi.
Yeah.
Or invite somebody to do something you're going to be doing anyway, right? It's those hacks that I think would be the first thing. So you don't have to add time. I think the other thing is just set yourself a little intention of who you want to see more of. Think about that. Like who would I like to see more of, and take the risk of asking. So I'm like so stereotyped. My wife and I do the social thing where we go out with other couples and she does all the arranging and I just go along. And I realized if I keep doing that, I'm going to have no separate friendships of my own. So I started asking my guy friends like to go out to dinner, just the two of us. And they were like, what is this? And then they got, mandates. And then they really liked it.
Yeah.
And then we, and so I would say, think about something you might like to do that you don't usually do and ask somebody to do it with you that you don't usually go with and just see what happens. People really like being asked. You would be surprised at how much people appreciate it when you just say, hey, come do this thing with me.
That's awesome advice. And I just want to make sure we address the person listening who feels lonely.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
And finds it, has a lot of resistance towards making that outreach, or like they haven't really done this in a while. The most contact they've had is maybe a Zoom call, if that.
Yeah.
Any advice for someone like that?
Well,
or any words of wisdom at the very least?
There's actually research on this. Like there's research on what's the easiest way to make new friends. And what they say is that doing something you really care about or that you really enjoy and doing it with other people who you don't know yet is one of the surest way to eventually build new connections. If you're lonely, for example. So, if you love soccer, if you love gardening, if, anything, can be anything. If you love political activity, volunteer to do something in a group of people where the same people will come back time after time. Volunteering in a food pantry or a soup kitchen, right? And that what happens is if you're there with other people and you have something in common, which is this activity, there's a more natural way to strike up conversations. It's less awkward because you've already got something in common. And that's one way that a lonely or more shy person might be able to get up the courage to just make a casual comment or two to somebody and eventually strike up more of a relationship.
It's genius. I think what's really genius about that is I've had periods where I don't want to do anything, and you kind of need to get leverage on yourself in those times. And what better way to get leverage on yourself than this is something I really, really want to do. Like no matter who it's with, this is something I really would genuinely enjoy doing. So I think that's great advice.
I would also add to that. You talk about getting leverage on yourself, and there's that fear that sometimes comes in where you sign up for something and then you don't go, right?
Yes.
The way you really can get leverage on yourself is pay for it in advance.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So really put your money there. And then when you have that thought of like, oh, I really don't want to go, but I paid $200, I better go now, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's like a really practical tip to end on here.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
Oh,
that, yeah,
Can I give one more tip?
of course, yeah.
Which is, don't expect it to work out every time. So
That's a good
like,
advice.
if you're up to bat at a baseball game, you're not going to hit the ball every time, right? Remember, sometimes you're going to reach out and somebody's not going to text you back, or
Yeah.
they're not going to be interested in what you want to do. That's okay. You have to be willing for it not to
Yeah.
be a home run every time.
Yeah. So
Right.
basically level set your expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Gotcha.
much more often than not, if you do it, like 5 times, you're going to get some positive results.
Yeah. That's amazing advice. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of all the wisdom in this book, The Good Life. Highly recommend everyone listening and watching, pick it up and read it. Bob has so much more wisdom to share with all of us. Bob, appreciate you sharing it with us.
This was great, you guys.
Appreciate it.
Really.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end.
If you like this episode of BSU, you'll probably also like this one right here. So give it a click. Yeah, just click it. All right. See you next time. Peace.